Hi, this is Lindsay O'Donnell Welch and Dennis Fisher with Decipher. And with 2024 coming up fast, we, along with some of our friends in the cybersecurity industry, are going to be taking a look at the top stories of 2023 that really shaped the year in cybersecurity and what we learned from them. So, Dennis, I don't know about you, but it was actually really hard for me to pick what stood out this year. There were
Yeah.
a lot of different things from kind of the 3CX attack to at a more granular level, like watching some of the administration's executive order points be implemented. But there was no like one big thing that we've had, like a Colonial Pipeline or Solar Winds or Log4j level event. So it was a little difficult.
No, I completely agree. I was looking through our site, looking at stories and trying to decide what to do. And there was just like a Waffle House menu of things you could look at and pick. It was a big year, like a huge news year. We would always joke like every Friday, signing off, it was like hope nothing happens over the weekend, but pretty much every weekend something happened. And it was a crazy year. So there was no shortage of stuff to pick.
Yeah, there was a lot there. I do think the biggest thing for me was not necessarily like an incident, but more at an overarching level, like how cybersecurity risk was being discussed at the enterprise level, and how security challenges were being shaped and framed in an evolving way in conversations between CISOs and at the board level.
Yeah.
That was one that definitely stuck out, and the SEC's cyber rule really was the driving factor behind that, which the deadlines for that actually went into effect this past week. So it basically asks companies to disclose incidents within 4 days of determining that they're material. And of course, that created a lot of conversation around that. But
Yeah.
the bigger part of the regulation, in my opinion, was actually that they were requiring companies to continually assess the effectiveness of their security risk management practices. I think as part of that too, companies would need to like publicly disclose like the level of oversight of their boards of directors and the role and the role and expertise of management in assessing these security risks. So, as part of that, it really shifts the dynamics between the CISOs and the executives. And now we're seeing discussions around kind of the risks that are inherent in businesses and the choices that exist about those, um, as well as more of a concerted effort by CISOs to kind of frame threats from not from a technical perspective, but more in the speaking the language of board members and discussing what security means for business risk and trying to frame it more as security as a business opportunity. And it's driving a lot of different changes there at the business level.
Yeah, that's a great one because I mean, we talk to a lot of CISOs, we talk to other executives all the time, and one of the historic issues between those two sort of not sides, but two groups of people is they do speak different languages a lot of the time. Depending on whether the CISO came up through a technical path or through maybe a more business oriented path, there might be some challenges in communicating what the risks are to the board. That's something we hear all the time, especially from CISOs. Is like, we know what the risks are, but sometimes it's hard to translate that to what it might mean for the business if we get hit with ransomware, if this happens, what does it mean for the business itself? So I think this is all part of that larger conversation, and the SEC regulations I think are going to play a big role. We've already seen a lot of discussion about it, and it's only been 3 days. So I think there was already one enforcement action, like maybe yesterday or Monday. Yeah.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of ripple effects, I think, into 2024. And I'm curious too, like to see how this all plays out with we talked about CISOs trying to translate to boards of directors, but also boards of directors and executives are trying to gain more security expertise and really
Yeah.
wrap their hands around this. And I've heard from CISOs that some companies have appointed board members with strong cybersecurity expertise. Some, companies have also even created dedicated cybersecurity committees. So
Yep.
hopefully this is going to drive some change from not just like the CISO perspective, but also the companies themselves in all of
Yeah.
this. Um,
Yeah.
so that's a big one. Dennis, what was kind of your big story that stood out to you?
So for me, I had trouble like picking one thing, but I think one of the overarching themes, if you look back at the year in review, is some of the disruption efforts that the U.S. government and other law enforcement partners had against ransomware groups. It started in January with the Hive ransomware takedown. There were other enforcement actions against Ragnar Locker. And there was one just this week against the ALV/Black Cat ransomware group, where the FBI and Department of Justice and CISA and a whole bunch of other groups, it all seems to be a team effort these days. Um, we're able to seize the infrastructure. They grabbed I believe they got access to a domain controller used by the Black Hat group. They seized their dark web marketplace, their affiliate dashboard, all that kind of stuff. And these things tend to go in sort of a cycle where the government or law enforcement figures out a way that is reusable against some of these groups, whether it's coming in through the payment ecosystem or getting an affiliate to flip or something, whether it's a technical or a human method to get into these groups. And we've seen that 4 or 5 times in the last 12 months. It's really been effective. The interesting thing to me this week with the Alfie/Black Cat one was that group seemed to obviously they were mad. They seemed to take it personally. They essentially were like, we're gonna fight back. I don't really know what that means, but um they I think said they were gonna essentially take off any restrictions they had on affiliates targeting hospitals or other sensitive targets, which is just, I mean, really great. Just great work, everyone. But it's encouraging to me to see the cooperation between U.S. law enforcement, international law enforcement, and from the federal, state, and local level. Because this stuff, a lot of times, FBI, DOJ get a lot of the credit because they're the ones having the press conferences and stuff. There's always stuff going on in the background with, if you've read Andy Greenberg's recent book on this, there's a lot of people at the IRS probably working on this problem, or the SEC, or other people involved in the financial part of this that work on this as well. So it's a broad effort, and it's nice to see the ransomware ecosystem getting kicked in the teeth and some of these things staying down. Some come back to life in various forms, and there's always new ones popping up. But it's really nice to see some of this having an effect.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned at the partnerships and collaborations at kind of the international level. I think also
Yeah.
the private and public sector partnerships that are being formed plays a big role there too. And that's one specific aspect that, like, personally I feel has changed in the past few years. Like the FBI and the US government saying, this needs to be a partnership with the private sector if we're going to have any success in trying to gather the information and really try to help victims, and gain more visibility into attacker TTPs. So I
Yeah,
think that's an interesting aspect of it as well.
completely agree. They've always talked about it. It hasn't always worked, but it seems like it's really started to work in the last 12 to 18 months. Yeah.
Absolutely. So those are our biggest stories that we wanted to highlight in 2023, but we also asked a couple special guests from across the industry to name a few of their own. So without further ado, here is Patrick Wardle, the founder of the Objective C Foundation and macOS expert, to talk more about his own opinions.
I'm going to caveat this answer by saying that I pretty much only play in the Apple security space. So my answer might be a little biased. But we've seen some really interesting trends and some stories in 2023 impacting individuals, corporations in the Apple ecosystem. And I guess my broad answer would be just the increased sophistication of the adversaries, the attacks affecting both iOS devices and macOS devices. So we had a large number of reports, especially from Google and some other organizations, uncovering zero-click attacks against iPhone users. These are incredibly insidious, often attributed to nation states. So I think this year really showed that, unfortunately, even due to Apple's best efforts, a lot of these are still very prolific and really drives home the unfortunate point that nation states adversaries often have very sophisticated capabilities, zero-click capabilities that they're able to target even fully patched systems. So I think that's one really takeaway that drives home the point of the increased sophistication of attackers. In the Mac space, we also saw some very interesting stories, some very interesting attacks. The 3CX supply chain attack. Many people are probably familiar with supply chain attacks. Basically, the idea is when a company gets hacked and then the attackers are able to infect the software of that company to then target and infect all of their customers. And we've seen this on the Windows side a lot, but 3CX was really one of the first main times where adversaries also were targeting companies that had Mac software. So 3CX, they were able to surreptitiously infect both the Windows and the Mac installers, and then infect a large number of Mac users around the world. So it's kind of like, okay, now in the past, as a Mac user, you might not have been as subjected as much to these supply chain attacks, but 2023 really showed that wasn't the case. And similarly, also then just ransomware. We saw Lockbit, a very prolific ransomware group, for the first time targeting macOS in 2023. So that was not surprising to me, but I think still a big story for 2023. Luckily, their macOS variant of their ransomware was still kind of a work in development, but the takeaway is really that these very prolific, very skilled, very successful ransomware groups really now have their eyes set on macOS as well. And it was only a matter of time before that happened, but 2023 was the year we saw that. More recently, a few weeks ago, we saw a new variant of ransomware. Turtle ransomware appears to be out of China, also targeting macOS systems. So we don't have to panic yet, but we should be aware that adversaries now more than ever are realizing that iOS, macOS is a very juicy target. A lot of enterprise systems are now running macOS using iOS. And so, this was eventually going to happen. And I think 2023 was one of the, if not the year where the adversaries really started to step up their game. So what did we learn? What we can do? Well, I think awareness is always maybe the first step, education. So just even realizing, okay, I have a Mac, where I have Mac systems in my enterprise. They are not immune to these threats. The adversaries are paying just as much attention to them, developing just as many capabilities. So what I need to do is make sure that my defense posture is just as strong as my Windows defense posture. And traditionally, Windows security tools and the incident response plans for Windows systems are a little more mature. Kind of had more time. So it's really now the time to ask the question, like, do we have parity? Are we running maybe security tools on our Mac OS systems that give us as much insight into our Windows systems? So ideally, we can detect and thwart something, but if an attack happens, can we at least have then enough telemetric data, enough logs, detection capabilities that maybe after the fact figure out what's going on? And this can be like ransomware detection, endpoint security products, really any defense in-depth solution, I think, is a great idea. And just, don't be naive. Realize that the attackers, the adversaries, now more than ever coming for Macs and iOS devices, and doing so with now very sophisticated exploits and approaches.
So my name's Casey Ellis. I'm the founder and chief strategy officer for BugCrowd. 2023 was a heck of a year. It feels bizarre that we're already talking about Christmas because it all kind of flew past very quickly. But from a trend standpoint, there's a couple of things that stood out to me. One was just, frankly, from a company standpoint, BugCrowd had an amazing year, and I think that's reflective of this continuing kind of acceptance and increase in the adoption of the feedback of the good faith security community as a part of defense. I think there was a lot of reasons to double down on that throughout the year, which I'll get to in a second. But what we've seen is a combination of organizations understanding that vulnerable disclosure and just being able to receive vulnerabilities on the internet, that's not dirty laundry anymore, so to speak. It's not an admission of failure or guilt that they need to be ashamed of. It's just literally a part of how the internet works. So that's driven a lot of conversations that we've had. But then I think on top of that, two other trends that I've been tracking pretty closely throughout the year have actually driven, I think a stronger understanding of the fact that it does take a crowd of allies to outsmart a crowd of adversaries. One of those is AI, and just the fact that like a whole bunch of really powerful tooling has been put in the hands of basically everyone over the past 12 months, and that definitely changes the threat landscape and increases the variety of threat actors a defender might be considering. And the other, honestly, feels like it feels kind of like the return of hacktivism in a lot of ways. With some of the stuff that happened at the end of last year with the Uber breach and Lapsus coming back in and really operating as a threat actor that we haven't been planning on dealing with for quite some time. I think a lot of the defense that we've been focused on over the past 10 years has been mostly around the idea of a symmetric threat actor, where you've got stated goals. They want to have a take from it. They want to be able to actually survive with that take and go off and do their thing. I'm talking about cyber criminals and nation states. That's kind of what we've gotten used to over the past period of time. But what we've started to see is the return of threat actors whose behavior is to us kind of irrational and chaotic. Like we don't really know what they want. They've got a reason for hacking and doing their thing. But because we don't fully understand what their motivations are and we can't fully kind of get ahead of those things, it becomes a different game from a defensive standpoint. So on that side of things, obviously there's a lot going on in the world today, and that only continues to increase. There's a lot of reasons to be annoyed and to be wanting to protest or wanting to operate in a hacktivist capacity, and that's a trend that I'm tracking pretty closely into 2024 because I foresee that that's going to continue, and I think hacktivists that operate in that way are going to see the success of others and actually be inspired by that and motivated to do their own thing. So that's I think if we can get ahead of that type of thing, then we're in a good position to try to work out how to defend ourselves against it. But it's definitely something that I feel has caught us a little bit off guard throughout the course of 2023. And then on the AI side, I mean, everyone's talking about it. I feel like it's it's the almost the bingo card answer to this type of question. But we weren't talking about AI and the role of machine learning and AI in computer science just in general, let alone in cybersecurity in this way. 15 months ago, I think ChatGPT and the others that followed basically dumped these ideas onto the collective conscious of the internet. And that triggered a bunch of things. It triggered, obviously, folks operating offensively, picking up that tooling and starting to learn how to work with it. As a byproduct of that, we've seen the time between a patch being dropped on the internet and a working exploit actually being seen in the wild and weaponized and used decrease fairly reliably over the past 12 months because LLMs are very good at helping people do patch diffing and exploit development. So that's a interesting kind of byproduct of that tech becoming commoditized and available to everyone. And I think on top of that, just the average, what we've seen even in bug crowd land, the time for a new hacker, so to speak, to get to a point of success has shrunk as well, because all of a sudden they've got access to all these tools that can help them learn and be effective. If they're learning how to use the tools in parallel with learning how to become more effective as a hacker, their time to effectiveness is a lot shorter. So we're seeing that on the defensive side, but obviously you can assume that we're seeing that on the offensive side as well. Probably the last piece there is just a ton of reactive policy creation. I think AI kind of freaked everyone out. We all got really super excited about it, and there was a collective, "Oh crap, what about Skynet?" moment that happens, in the public eye. And whenever that happens, it becomes an issue of retail politics, and you have legislators come in and start to find ways to write rules around it, to begin with, to make the public feel safe, but then obviously to actually regulate and try to create actual safety as well. So things like the Bletchley Park Accord out of the UK, things like the Biden executive order that we're a part of helping actually create in North America. There's a bunch of other stuff basically on the floor at this point in time. It's going to be a busy year next year for AI safety and security policy creation. And I think the fact that there's momentum around it is a good thing, but obviously we want to try to avoid unintended consequences as well. So yeah, as I said, it's been a busy year, and that's before you get into all of the fun security research and exploits and all sorts of other things that popped out throughout the course of the year as well. So could probably go on for a long time on that stuff, but we'll pause it there.
Hello, I'm Hazel Burton from Cisco Talos. So, my top cybersecurity story of 2023 is not strictly a story about cybersecurity, but it is a really important story that shows the impact that efforts can have outside of the cybersecurity realm. So, this is the story of Project Power Up and how Cisco and Talos were able to help Ukraine effectively keep the lights on in the face of electronic warfare. So, Cisco Talos has been continuing to support Ukraine with our task unit, helping them to protect critical infrastructure from a constant onslaught of cyber attacks and intelligence collection. And this year, a chance meeting led us to creating customized industrial switches to keep power grids going in Ukraine despite a very unique issue, and that is the effects of GPS jamming. So, Ukraine is obviously dealing with attacks in the form of bombs and missiles, as well as cyber attacks. And as part of all of that, there is a lot of electronic interference. And this is affecting GPS, and GPS is what is it's what keeps substations going, and it allows people to consume electricity in real time without accurate timestamps because of this deliberate jamming, this deliberate GPS jamming. Operators have to essentially attempt to balance power in the dark. And this is an incredibly tough situation. And it does mean that vital power and vital energy supplies to Ukraine isn't stable. So, my colleague Joe Marshall, who is the leader behind this initiative, Project Power Up, he learned about this issue over dinner with people from Ukrenergo, who they are the electricity energy provider in Ukraine. And this issue of how to deal with the effects of GPS jamming, it just never left his head, and he really wanted to help. So this set him on a path through Talos, through Cisco, and effectively recruited a large group of volunteers to customize, to build, to ship, to test these devices and install them in Ukraine. And so now, when GPS jamming occurs, these devices can step in and keep accurate time and keep delivering power to the people of Ukraine. As Joe wrote about in Project Power Up on the Talos blog, the effects are incredibly difficult to calibrate, but we know that it's helping people who are in an impossibly difficult situation. It is helping a hospital that might not have reliable backup power. It is giving a child 5 more minutes of their childhood by watching cartoons. I can't tell you just how difficult this project was to get off the ground and to deliver, but the impact is incredible, and it just goes to show that when you get a bunch of really smart, dedicated people together who are determined to help, then amazing things can happen.